It started like any other day for Maya, a 22-year-old college student on her way home after a long shift at work. She had no idea that within minutes she would find herself at the center of a situation that would test her patience, dignity, and sense of justice. Driving through a quiet neighborhood, she kept her eyes on the road, listening to her favorite playlist, lost in her own thoughts. Then, out of nowhere, flashing red and blue lights appeared in her rearview mirror. Her heart pounded. She wasn't speeding. She hadn't run a light. So why was she being pulled over? As she carefully guided her car to the side of the road, a sinking feeling crept in. She had heard stories like this before, about people being stopped for no good reason, about officers making assumptions before even asking questions. And now it was happening to her. Two officers approached, their hands resting near their holsters. The older one, with a hardened expression, leaned down to her window. "License and registration," he said, his tone firm. Maya handed them over without hesitation, her hands steady but her stomach in knots. She knew better than to argue. The younger officer glanced inside her car, scanning every detail like he was searching for something, anything. Then the questions started. "Where are you headed? Do you live around here? Is this your car?" It wasn't the words themselves, but the way they were asked, like she didn't belong, like she had something to prove. Maya remained calm, answering each question with quiet confidence. But when they asked her to step out of the vehicle, she knew this was more than a routine stop. Something wasn't right. She took a deep breath and did as she was told, feeling the weight of the moment press down on her. What happened next would turn the tables completely, leaving these officers facing consequences they never saw coming. Maya stepped out of the car, the cool night air hitting her skin as she stood on the pavement. She could feel the weight of the officers' stares, sizing her up, searching for something they could use against her. She had done nothing wrong, but that didn't seem to matter. The older officer took a step closer, his eyes scanning her like she was a suspect in a crime that hadn't even happened. "Mind if we take a look inside your car?" he asked, though it didn't sound like a question. It felt like an expectation. Maya hesitated. She knew her rights. "Is there a reason?" she asked, keeping her voice calm but firm. The younger cop exchanged a glance with his partner before speaking. "Just a routine check. Nothing to worry about." Routine? Maya knew better. If this was routine, why hadn't they given her a reason for the stop in the first place? Why did it feel like she was guilty until proven innocent? But she also knew that pushing back too hard could make things worse. So she took a breath and stood her ground. "I'd rather not, unless there's a real reason," she said, watching their expressions shift slightly. The older officer's jaw tightened. He didn't like being questioned. "You sure about that?" he asked, tilting his head. Maya didn't flinch. She had nothing to hide, but that wasn't the point. The point was that she shouldn't have to prove herself just because they had a hunch, one that seemed based on nothing but her appearance. The silence stretched between them. The younger officer shifted on his feet, glancing at his partner, maybe second-guessing how far they should take this. Then, before anyone could say another word, another car pulled up, a sleek black sedan. The driver's door opened and someone stepped out. Maya's heart skipped a beat when she recognized the face. This was about to take a turn no one saw coming. The moment Maya saw the man stepping out of the black sedan, a strange mix of relief and apprehension filled her chest. He was dressed in a crisp suit, his movements deliberate and confident. The officers noticed him too. Their postures stiffened, but they didn't say a word as he walked toward them. "Maya, everything okay?" the man asked, his voice calm but firm. The officers exchanged a quick glance. It was clear they hadn't expected anyone to intervene. The older cop straightened up, his expression guarded. "This is a routine traffic stop, sir. We were just asking her a few questions." Maya could see the way the man's eyes flickered with understanding, like he knew exactly what was going on. He turned to her, lowering his voice just enough for only her to hear. "Did they give you a reason for stopping you?" She shook her head. "No reason at all," she whispered. That was all he needed to hear. He turned back to the officers, his expression unreadable. "I assume you've already checked her license and registration." The younger officer shifted uncomfortably. "Yeah, everything came back clean." "Then why are you still holding her here?" the man asked, his voice still even, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. The older officer's jaw clenched. He wasn't used to being questioned like this, especially not by someone who seemed to hold some kind of authority. "Sir, we're just doing our job." The man took a slow step forward. "I know exactly what you're doing." Maya glanced between them, tension thick in the air. Who was this man? She had met him once before, briefly, but she never expected to see him here, stepping in like this. The younger officer cleared his throat, his confidence wavering. "We're not trying to cause any trouble." "Then I suggest you wrap this up," the man said, his tone cool. "Because trouble is exactly what you'll have if you keep pushing this." Maya saw the hesitation in the officers' faces. They had a decision to make. But before they could act, the man reached into his pocket, pulling out something that made both cops freeze. The silence was thick as the man slowly pulled something from his pocket. The officers' hands instinctively twitched toward their belts, their eyes locked on him with caution. But when he revealed what he was holding, Maya felt the shift in the air. It wasn't a weapon, it was a badge. Not just any badge. A high-ranking official's ID. The older officer's face twitched as he read the name, his confidence cracking for the first time. The younger cop swallowed hard, suddenly looking unsure of himself. "You're with Internal Affairs?" the older officer asked, his voice quieter now. The man gave a small nod. "That's right. And I've been looking into reports of stops just like this one." He let his words sink in before adding, "I assume your body cams are on." Neither officer answered. The hesitation said it all. Maya's heart pounded as she realized what that meant. If they had been following proper procedure, they would have answered without hesitation. The man sighed, slipping his badge back into his pocket. "Turn them on now." His voice was steady, but there was no mistaking the authority behind it. The younger cop fumbled with his vest, a soft beat breaking the silence as his camera powered on. The older one hesitated a second longer before finally pressing the button. Maya didn't say a word, but she could feel the tension growing. The officers were caught off guard. They had pulled over the wrong person, made the wrong assumptions, and now they were standing face to face with someone who had the power to hold them accountable. The man turned to Maya. "Are you okay?" She nodded, but she wasn't sure if she actually was. The entire situation had escalated so quickly. She had been prepared for a long, exhausting argument, for frustration, for helplessness. But now things had flipped. The officers shifted uncomfortably, as if waiting for something, some way out of this. But there was none. The man looked back at them, his expression unreadable. "Now," he said, his voice calm but firm, "let's talk about why you really stopped her." The officers didn't respond right away. The older one clenched his jaw, his eyes darting between Maya and the man standing beside her. The younger cop shifted on his feet, clearly rattled. The air was thick with tension, but Maya noticed something else, a flicker of something unreadable in the older officer's eyes. Was it guilt, or was it something else entirely? Then, just as the silence became unbearable, the older officer let out a breath and shook his head. "Look, this is a misunderstanding," he said, his voice measured but tight. "We weren't trying to cause any problems." The man in the suit tilted his head slightly, studying him. "A misunderstanding," he repeated, his tone calm but skeptical. "Then let's clear it up. Why did you pull her over?" The officer hesitated. Maya could see the gears turning in his head, trying to come up with something that would make this all go away. "We had a report of a stolen vehicle matching this description," he finally said. "Standard protocol to check." Maya's stomach dropped. A stolen vehicle. She had owned this car for 2 years, had all the paperwork, and had never once been stopped for anything like this. She glanced at the man beside her, and he gave her the smallest nod, like he already knew this wasn't the truth. "That's interesting," he said, pulling out his phone and tapping the screen a few times. "Because I just ran the records. There haven't been any reports of a stolen car matching this description in the past 48 hours. The younger cop inhaled sharply, looking at his partner. The older officer's face darkened, his jaw tightening. The excuse had fallen apart before it could even hold weight. Then, before anyone could react, the radio on the older officer's shoulder crackled to life. A voice on the other end, sharp, urgent. "Unit 7, return to base immediately. There's a situation." Maya watched as both officers stiffened. The younger one reached for his radio, hesitating. "Copy that, dispatch. What's the status?" A brief pause. Then the response came through, low but unmistakable. "Internal Affairs is here. They want to speak with you both, now." Maya's breath caught. She saw the flicker of panic in the older officer's face. They weren't just in trouble. They were in deep. The silence that followed the radio call was thick, heavy. The older officer's face hardened, his mind clearly racing. The younger cop looked shaken, like he had just realized how deep they were in. Maya felt her pulse quicken. This was it. The man beside her didn't move, didn't react, but there was a quiet intensity in his gaze. "Sounds like your department wants a word with you," he said, his voice measured. The older officer's eyes darted between them, his fingers twitching at his side. Then, without a word, he turned and walked briskly toward the patrol car. The younger cop hesitated, looking almost like he wanted to say something, but instead he followed. The doors slammed shut, and the red and blue lights flickered back on. Maya exhaled as the patrol car sped off, kicking up dust as it disappeared down the road. It was over. Also, she thought. She turned to the man who had stepped in, questions swirling in her mind. "Who are you, really?" she asked. He gave her a small smile, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Someone who doesn't like seeing good people get treated like criminals." Maya narrowed her eyes. "But you knew this was going to happen. You were already watching them." The man studied her for a moment, then pulled out his phone again. With a few swipes, he handed it to her. Maya's eyes widened as she scanned the screen. There, in clear detail, were reports, complaints filed against these same officers, all eerily similar to what had just happened to her. Unjustified stops, questionable searches, people intimidated into silence. Her stomach turned. "They've done this before. And they were going to keep doing it," the man said. "But now there's proof." Maya looked up at him, realization dawning. "That's why you were here tonight. You weren't just passing by." He gave a small shrug. "Let's just say, sometimes, the best way to catch someone is to let them think they're in control." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. Before she could respond, the man's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then gave her a nod. "Looks like it's all in motion now. Those two won't be making any more stops like this." Maya watched as he turned to leave, the weight of everything settling over her. "Wait," she called after him. "Will I see you again?" He paused, then glanced over his shoulder. "Maybe. But if I've done my job right, you won't have to." And just like that, he disappeared into the night, leaving Maya standing there, the reality of what had just happened sinking in. She had walked into a nightmare, but somehow, justice had found a way to catch up. Maya stood there for a long moment, watching as the taillights of the black sedan faded into the distance. The night was quiet again, but she felt different, like something heavy had just lifted off her chest. She had spent her whole life hearing stories like this, but tonight she had lived it, and for once the ending was different. She climbed back into her car, her hands still gripping the wheel a little too tightly. Taking a deep breath, she let herself process what had just happened. The officers had clearly been doing this for a while, stopping people like her, hoping no one would push back, but they had pushed their luck one too many times. As she pulled back onto the road, her mind raced with questions. Who was that man, really? How deep did this investigation go? And what would happen to those officers now? But another thought settled in. None of this would have come to light if she had stayed silent, if she had just let them do what they wanted. She had stood her ground, and in the end, that had made all the difference. Her phone buzzed when she got home, a message from an unknown number. Asterisk. They're off the streets. You did good tonight. Stay safe. Asterisk. Maya stared at the message, her heart pounding. She didn't need to ask who it was from. A part of her wanted to reply, to ask more questions, but she didn't. Instead, she locked her phone and sat for a moment, letting the weight of everything settle. This wasn't just about her. There were so many others who had been stopped, questioned, made to feel like they didn't belong. But tonight, something changed. As she finally got up and headed inside, she knew one thing for sure: justice wasn't always loud. Sometimes it happened quietly, in the background, where the right people were watching. And tonight, the right people had been watching.